Hi everyone, this is Celine from Blue Calo Patterns. Welcome to the first video for the rose gathered shoulder bag. I used to call it the handbag, but I realize it's kind of bigger than a handbag, so the term shoulder bag is probably more appropriate for this pattern. This is an older pattern, one of my first actually, and I've had a few requests to bring it back, so because it's older, I wanted to update it, so I figured at the same time I will film a video series for the bag. So what I'll do to start is I'll just show you the bag and the different features, and then talk about some of the optional features you can sew into the bag. It is just a shoulder bag, so there is no crossbody strap, and the shoulder straps are longer than my usual the usual length that I use in patterns, so it does fit comfortably over your shoulder, and you know, the straps are longer, so it hangs a bit lower on the side of your body. It does have gathered sides, so if you like bags that have a really more of a boxy shape, and the lining of the bag is just very smooth and tight fitting, then this is not the bag for you. Because of the way that the sides are gathered, there's no way you're going to get a perfect fitting lining. It is a more a gathered look on the inside as well. So for the most part, the bag is the same as the original version. It has a pleated bottom, which gives the depth. So instead of using boxed corners or darts, I've done a pleated bottom, and then it makes it nice and wide along the bottom. So the two shoulder straps, the gathered sides, and you just you're going to be sewing two channels here, and then you're just passing the tie through and tying it. You can either tie it at the top or the bottom. I prefer the bottom. Now, it always had the tab closure in the original version, but I wanted to add a zipper closure because I know everyone prefers that the zipper closure on a bag. So you can make it with just the zipper closure, just the tab closure, or you can do like what I've done here, and I've done both. So figure out what you like in terms of a bag closure, and then you'll have to modify your cutting a little bit based on what you decide to do. So the zipper opens. Now you'll see, because the sides are gathered, that it is narrower here at the top, and then it really widens as it gets down to the bottom of the bag. So here's what I was mentioning. If you like a really perfect lining that doesn't have any gathers, then this is not the bag for you. Inside the bag there are 3 slip pockets, 1, 2, 3, and there is one zippered pocket, and you'll see that the lining also has the pleats at the bottom to give it some depth. So hopefully, there you go, maybe you can see that. So there's pleats here in the bottom as well. All right, so that is the features of the bag. I'm going to set this bag aside for now, and I'm going to go over the notions that you're going to need to make the bag. So in terms of the supplies that you're going to need, aside from fabric and interfacing, you really don't need a lot to make this bag. It can be a really inexpensive bag to make, actually. The one thing that you'll absolutely need are 4 O-rings. You can use 1 inch if that's all you have, but I really recommend using 1.5 inch, because I find the straps are 1 inch wide. So with a 1 inch O-ring, it's a little bit too tight, and there's not a lot of space in between the connector and the strap. So I would recommend 1.5 inch O-rings. Now for your tab closure, you have 2 options in the pattern. If you want to keep it less expensive, you can just use a regular 18mm magnetic snap. If you want to get a little bit fancier, you can use a turn lock. The tab is quite big, so you can really use any type of lock that you have on hand. Even the bigger ones fit quite nicely on this tab. So I'm just going to use this simple oval turn lock. And then for the main zipper, you can either do a fabric zipper end. I have a link to a tutorial for that in the pattern. I'm going to be using a metal zipper end just because it's faster, and yeah, I just like the way that they look. And then you're going to need two zippers. So you need a 9-inch dress zipper for the interior zipper pocket. And then I'm using zipper tape for the main zipper. And you can either, it's the same, you can either use it is 14 inches of zipper tape, but you could probably get away with using a shorter one, because I will show you here on the bag again. This is 14 inches, but as you can see, like that, there's a lot of excess zipper tape. I could have easily trimmed this down. So in the pattern, I've put that you only need either a 12-inch prepared zipper or 12 inches of zipper tape. So I wanted to leave a longer tail, so I made it a little bit longer. Same with this one, it's 14 inches. So you can use whatever length you want, but the minimum length would be 12 inches. And that is the same dimensions whether you're using zipper tape or a prepared zipper. It's 12 inches for this pattern. Okay, so I'm going to set these aside, and then we're going to go over all the pieces that you need to cut. Now, before you start cutting or anything like that, I highly recommend that you print out the pattern and that you read through the whole set of instructions before you do anything at all. I know that I have it here written in red bold letters to please read the entire pattern before starting, but I think a lot of people don't do that, and then they end up missing something important. So make sure that you read through the entire pattern before you start cutting or anything like that. On the so in the pattern pieces section, I actually have them all printed out here. I haven't cut them out or taped them yet, but I wanted to show you. So it mentions in the pattern pieces section that there are certain pieces that you're going to have to tape together. So one of those pieces is the accent panel piece. This has two different pieces, and you'll notice the matching symbols. So you have to cut the pieces out and then tape them together and match up the dash lines with the matching symbols and tape those together. You can just butt the lines together. You don't have to overlap them or anything like that. Your flap closure piece. Your lining top band. So that's the piece I'm going to show you on the bag. That's this strip right here that goes along the top on the lining side. And then you have the main lining piece, which is 3 pieces that need to be taped together. And you'll see there's symbols that show you where you need to tape the pieces together. So it's 3 different pieces for the main lining. And then you have your side panel piece, which is just 2 pieces that need to be taped together. So that's it. There's a few other pieces that need to be cut, but they're all cut to measurements. So if you look on page 3 at the top, you're going to have a cutting chart. And I love using cutting charts now because as I cut my pieces, I just check it off with a pencil. And then when I'm done the bag, I erase the pencil marks, and then it's ready when I make another bag. So I'm going to go through the cutting chart and show you all my pieces. For the flap closure, you have 2 exterior pieces. So in terms of you know what you want, what kind of fabric, what pattern you want to use for different parts of the bag, I'll show you on this bag, and I'm going to be doing exactly the same method but with different fabric. I actually used cork for the flap closure, the connectors, and the shoulder strap. Just because I want them to be more durable and thicker, and also I don't have to interface them if I use cork or vinyl. You don't have to use that. You can use fabric for the entire bag and it will be perfectly fine. So I have used cork for the 2 flap closure pieces, and then you also need to cut a thicker interfacing to stabilize the tab closure. Now, there's 2 different types of interfacing that you should use depending on what type of closure you've chosen. So if you are choosing to use a magnetic snap and you're using fabric, you need to cut a flap closure piece in fusible fleece. If you're using a turn lock like I am, I want to give this more structure because the turn lock is a bit heavier. So I also cut a piece. This is called stiff stuff, but you can use any. It's very thin, but it's pretty structured. And I use that when I'm installing turn locks to give it more structure. So this is stiff stuff. I've cut 1 flap closure piece out of this material. So depending on what type of closure you've used, either a magnetic snap or a turn lock, you want to cut a different kind of interfacing to put inside the tab. The accent panel. These are my accent panels. So if you look at the bag, the accent panels are what you see in the center on the front, in the back of the bag. Okay, so that's where this is going to go. And for these 2 pieces, I have fused woven interfacing on the wrong side. Now I also need fusible fleece on these pieces. I haven't fused my fleece because I wanted to go over that with you. So any pieces of fusible fleece that you cut, you'll want to trim away the seam allowance. And the reason why is because it will start to get very bulky at the seams if you don't. So if you don't trim your the seam allowance from your fleece, then you're going to have, 4 layers of fleece plus your fabric. It'll get very bulky along these seams. It will also become very bulky where you have your pleats at the bottom. And again here along the top. So make sure that you trim the seam allowance from your fleece, and then you're going to fuse it to the wrong side over top of the woven interfacing, and you just make sure it's centered so that there's an even amount of space all the way around. Now, exactly how I just explained for the accent panels, you're going to do the same for the side panels. Now, you should have 2 sets, mirror image. So you see the curve at the bottom of these pieces goes in opposite directions. So you need 2 sets of mirror image pieces. In order to cut mirror image pieces, the easiest and fastest way to do this is to place your fabric right sides together, put your pattern piece over top, and then cut out, and then you'll automatically have mirror image pieces. So you want to cut 2 sets mirror image of your exterior fabric, and you'll also want to cut out mirror image pieces for your fusible woven interfacing. Okay, and you'll fuse that to the wrong side. You're also going to need 2 sets of mirror image pieces of your fusible fleece. Again, make sure that you cut away the seam allowance from these pieces before you fuse them to the wrong side, and you, again, make sure they're centered so that you have some space all the way around. Now I'm going to skip down to the bottom of the cutting chart because I just want to go over exterior pieces right now. The very last item in the cutting chart is your side ties. So these are it. They're just quilt weight cotton. You're not going to interface them because once you're done pressing and sewing them, they're going to be 4 layers thick, and that gives them enough structure. You just cut them 2 inches, and then I just use the width of the quilt weight cotton, which can either be between 42 inches to 44 inches, depending on the manufacturer of the fabric you're using. So you'll need 2 of those. Then I have my O-ring connector piece. Okay, I'm using cork for this, so I don't have interfacing on the wrong side because it's thick enough. The dimensions for this piece are in the cutting chart. If you're using fabric, make sure that you cut a matching piece of fusible woven interfacing and fuse it to the wrong side because you're going to want to give it a little bit more structure. Same for my shoulder straps. I'm using cork, so I'm not going to interface them. The dimensions for each piece is in the cutting chart. If you're using fabric, again, you need to cut some fusible woven interfacing and fuse it to the wrong side of these pieces. Okay, so that's it for our exterior pieces. Now we'll go through the lining pieces. So to start, you're going to have two of these main lining pieces. So you'll have them, you can use, I'm using quilt weight cotton, and I have a layer of fusible woven interfacing fused to the wrong side of both pieces. These do not have fleece, only the exterior pieces have fleece. Then on one of these lining panels, you're going to sew a interior zipper pocket. Now I'm not going to mention the dimensions, they are in the cutting chart, but you're going to need one zipper facing piece. And I always cut this out of the same fabric as my lining fabric. And then I have two interior zipper pocket pieces. The measurements are here. Now all of these pieces have fusible woven interfacing fused to the wrong side. Here are my lining top band pieces, which I just showed you on the other bag. It's the pieces, the strips that go all the way around the top edge on the lining side of the bag. They also have fusible woven interfacing on the wrong side. And then the last piece is your slip pocket piece. So keep in mind, if you're using a directional print like I am, that this is going to be a piece that you're going to fold in half, and you're going to sew along this edge and then turn it out, and it'll be in the shape, it'll be like a tube of fabric that you turn right side out. So if you're using a directional print like me, I'll go over this when I do the slip pocket sewing, but you're going to want to make sure that your print is right side up. And then the last thing you'll need are your zipper panel pieces. The dimensions are in the cutting chart. They all have fusible woven interfacing on the wrong side. You need two exterior pieces and two lining pieces. That's it for the preparation video. In the next video, we're going to start sewing the exterior of our bag.